guess I'm ashamed of what this president is doing. I'm not shocked by it. We have a homelessness crisis here, taking all these people and putting them on the street. This president, his last 2 budget requests, has tried to completely eliminate the CDBG program, cutting out all housing funds. He's been cruel and unusual to immigrants who are part of the engine that grows this country. So I'm fed up.
Most of those in places who should respond to the crisis are just saying, don't worry, I'm going to have another survey. I'm going to do another research project. And by the time that thing is over, I'll be out of office.
There is not a single individual that I talk to in local government who does not see this as the moral and political crisis of the time.
There's been this myth that houselessness in Los Angeles is off the Richter scale because people come to Los Angeles because of the weather. And so it's this idea that houselessness here is not a homegrown problem. If it's not a homegrown problem, you really can't blame it on structural inequality that policymakers should be paying attention to. 80% of those who are houseless in Los Angeles come from Los Angeles. Los Angeles manufactures its own houseless crisis. Many folks houseless in Los Angeles now are houseless in the communities that they used to be housed in.
So my name is Peter Lin. I am the Executive Director for the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority. We are a governmental agency. I have been leading LAHSA for the last 4.5 years. I think the challenge that we face on the local government side is that some of these factors are major systemic issues. So for example, the aftermath of mass incarceration. Well, we as a municipality are dealing with a lot of people who've been de-incarcerated, but the legacy of that trauma and those stigmas and the records they have lives on for people. So, there's enough of a challenge that exists at all different levels, but there is not a single elected official in Los Angeles I've ever spoken to who doesn't see this as urgent and a massive humanitarian and moral crisis.
I first moved and lived on Skid Row when I was 15. My family moved and we moved to the Union Rescue Mission. And it's difficult, especially when you're a kid, to be living in shelters and going and living on Skid Row and going through these sort of things and still have to go to school and be like, hi everybody, so. So I know a number of people that actually have full-time minimum wage jobs and still have to live in their tent because the cost of affordable living is so ridiculously high. The average amount that a person makes a year is about the same amount as a one-bedroom apartment. You're making exactly what you need to pay your rent, but that's not all you need to survive.
Money is being dished out in other areas instead of housing specifically. You put more beds in shelters, you're still homeless. If you're in a shelter that's temporary living, you're putting money there, whereas you could be putting money for permanent housing. It's the way the money can be spent.
LA has about the least affordable housing market in America, and the pressure is felt most acutely on the poorest Angelenos. So people are being driven into homelessness by the housing market moving much more rapidly than the poorest Angelenos' income. So that's really what we're seeing. Last year, we housed 21,000 people, and more people became homeless every day than we were housing. That's a massive systemic challenge for us. We need to get upstream and make housing affordability a priority. That way we can get ahead of this.
Oh yeah, so if y'all look around with me, we call this the skyline of oppression. There are cranes everywhere. There's a building boom going on in downtown Los Angeles. There's a 12 to 14% vacancy rate in downtown Los Angeles. That's scandalous. How do you have informal settlements and encampments cropping up everywhere, and at the same time, as quickly as a skyscraper goes up, 10 more encampments spread out? It's a vision of LA that leaves out those who have built Los Angeles.
Politicians also seem to be afraid. They don't have the language, they don't have the visceral understanding of what the community's like, and aren't thinking in ways that are creative and aren't thinking in ways that are relevant.
When I started to work, there was a conversation of displacement, because displacement suggests if you can't afford to live here, you could potentially afford to live somewhere else in the region. With gentrification happening at a feverish pitch from Skid Row to Manhattan, we're not talking about a conversation around displacement, because all subsidies around us and all places in the county are doing the same things. So the conversation has moved from displacement to banishment.
I feel like they've been talking and saying the same thing for so long. I don't want to see you on camera anymore. I don't want you to write any more articles on how much you care and how much you're trying to change things. I want to see you doing it.
I think it's completely understandable for people to be frustrated. Angelenos need to take responsibility for accepting the kinds of changes to our community that are necessary, which means that we have to build more and we need to accept more density. And that, I think, is something that there's a conversation at all levels of community, in the neighborhood planning, in neighborhood councils, at the city council district level, but in City Hall. We need to build more. If we don't build more, we're not going to get ahead of this crisis. In the meantime, as we prepare to build more, we need much more serious and robust renter protections. There are no protections statewide against rent gouging. You talk to people, you hear stories about, somebody's rent moving in, a few different jumps. So they get a 35% rent increase in less than a year. Those are the kinds of rents that drive people into homelessness. Those are rent increases that absolutely wash out people, and those are the kinds of things that, we can enact immediately. So I think there are fundamental activities that need to take place at all levels of government. People are absolutely right to be frustrated, but part of that frustration needs to be channeled at positive communications in their city council meetings to say, we need to build more housing, we need to build it now.